Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Mike Finley and I'm the CTO for AnswerRocket. Today I'm going to talk about our experience building GenAI analytics for the enterprise. AnswerRocket's been doing this for about 10 years now. We provide solutions to enterprise customers that are really looking for how to let their business users ask simple questions and get sophisticated answers. Here you can see some of the folks that we work with. And as I go through this, I'm going to try to call out some of the specific um, interesting ways that we do this that are fairly unique and that have allowed us to be live today with GenAI powered analytics. The technology that we deploy is called Max, and Max is basically a conversational copilot. Copilot is working with one specific function of your business at a time. So there might be one in HR, and there might be one in supply chain, there might be one in category management. There could be as many as you like, but they're very focused on the person that they're helping. And that's because that allows them to have a very vernacular style conversation with that individual about all the things that matter to that particular job function. Max is connected to the data, so if you have a large data store, it's going to be using that wherever it is, and it's skilled in advanced analytics, which means it's a super helpful companion that's able to sort of tirelessly work behind the scenes like a good Copilot should. And of course, Max is going to enforce all your enterprise sign-on rules and your provisioning relative to the data that you want users to access. The way that Max does all this is from a business user's perspective. On the left side here, you can see that the applications that are being used and the outputs that come from those are all the ones your users are used to, right? We're going to either through the Max UI or through the SDK provide integration to all the tools that the business user is experienced with already, and we're going to give them the results, whether that's PowerPoints or Excel spreadsheets or visuals that they're accustomed to. Behind the scenes, what's going on though? Well, that's the three elements that you see on the right side of the page, right? So first of all, the language model is at the foundation of everything we do, and it's not just the sort of hey, we use a vector database or hey, we use chat. No, we really get full advantage of all the capabilities of language models in here. That means semantic matching. It means creating narratives. It also means validation of results. It means chatting, all sorts of different capabilities that we use the language model for. And of course, Max has to help the language model get access to the data, whether that data is in a Redshift or a Snowflake or in a local file, or if it's unstructured, if it's in an existing knowledge base, maybe of PDF documents or what have you. And the thing that pulls all of this together to help Max do this work, this is the skills. So today we're going to talk a lot about skills and how skills help users answer questions. In fact, there's a whole tool set around skills called the Skill Studio. And so the two things we're going to do today is we're going to look a lot at the business user's experience, that's all the way on the right in this picture, and we're going to look at what the developers and analysts are doing to make their work reusable and democratized for those business users when the time comes. So with all that said, we're just going to jump into the demonstration because I think everything will make more sense when we do that. So I've started off in a Copilot that's assisting a category manager in the pasta market. It's got some syndicated data, and I started off with a simple question here: who sold the most pasta? Just to kind of get us started and get you oriented as to what's in this data set. You can see that the answer came back broken out by manufacturer, sorted by the largest, and it defaulted to a top five. One of the nuggets that's important for us to realize is that if you have a rule like, hey, I just want to default to five, don't try to train that into a model with fine tuning or some other, sort of sophisticated in-prompt examples and K-shot learning and all these things. If you know the default should be five, just make the default five, and then let the model override that when it wants to. This is code and configuration still being used in this language model world, but giving the language model all the control it needs to be able to override those factors. So here, this is a simple little report that it created. It looks like private label is at the top. Barilla is the second one, and it's got some complicated name in the database. But I want to know about the trend for Barilla without having to say all that stuff. So I'm just going to say trend Barilla. And while it's doing that, notice that I did get a paragraph with that previous answer describing the conditions in the market. It's not a very complicated question, so I'm not going to get a whole lot of insight out of that. But Now that I've asked my follow-on about Barilla, it says, okay, Barilla's sales and units have slightly decreased, with sales dropping by 1.7 and 941,000. And that's going from this beginning point over here all the way to this final point at the end. Now, I am curious though about this peak here. In fact, it looks like there's a seasonal peak every year around the holidays, and I'm curious about this last one. So I can ask a question like this, maybe, what powered their last holiday peak? And when I run this kind of a question, now you can really tell that I'm in the thread, in the context of the previous question. I'm referring to something that I saw on the chart. I want to know a little bit more detail behind that. And I don't just want a data extraction. I don't just want a dump of sales by week or something. I really want to drill in and understand across a number of different categories what it is that occurred. And so Max automatically intuits that and prepares that answer for me. And you can see here it's beginning to prepare this report as it's streaming back from the language model. So we'll let that finish concluding what it's going to say. And so, for example, I can see that the growth is primarily driven by the 16-ounce base size, as well as shortcut. So I get a couple of interesting insights there. I can also see that from based on this chart, I can see that it examined base sizes, categories, and segments in order to perform this analysis. I can see each of them individually if I want to understand their breakouts. Now, Max did this based on my question, and it's showing me these answers, and they're great. But how do I know what's behind this? How can I be sure? Well, it's providing us a lot of the detail of what it's doing, just to make sure we have all the information. For example, it looks like it compared November and December. That's the holiday period that it considered, and it compared 2022 versus 2021. Which is another important aspect of this analysis. I could have it do anything that I want. I could compare it to the prior period instead of the prior year. I could have it do just 1 month. But again, the Copilot is trying to just be interactive and fluid with me, tell me everything it's doing, but also help me out by not making me have to be tedious with it. If I hit this little I button over here, I can really have some interaction now with what did it do with the language model, what were the filters that it applied to get my answer. If I look at the logs, I can even see the SQL that was generated. I have some detailed timing around how long it took to do different things. So there's a lot of information there. And notice I also have a thumbs up and thumbs down button over here on the left that really lets me interact with this answer and be able to make Max get smarter and better over time. Okay, so now that we've seen this demonstration, and we will come back to chat in a little bit, but what I want to do is go over to the Skill Studio where you can see kind of what are these skills. The metric driver skill that was used to kind of give me this deep drill analysis. What was the trend analysis skill that was used just to put together this units and dollars picture that it gave me, and finally, what was this dimension breakout skill that it used up here? How do these skills interact? What are they all about? So I'm going to click up here in the upper left, and that's going to just give me an option to go to Skill Studio because my user has rights to access that. So here I am in Skill Studio, and notice it's a very different view, different perspective on Max. And I can see by clicking here on Dimension Breakout, I can see all the skills that are available to me. So I can see that I've got all the ones that you saw before. There's a market share drivers that you haven't even seen it use yet. I didn't ask any questions about market share, so it didn't choose to do any of those. But you can see that these skills are all here. Now, I can also click Add a New Skill, and this is a key point where somebody like an analyst in your business is able to make a new capability, a fundamentally new capability. Maybe it's accessing a different set of data, maybe it's using a different algorithm, maybe it's just a different perspective on how to understand a particular event in the marketplace. I can create that by starting from scratch and beginning to add all the elements of database queries and HTML templates and Python and so forth that I would need as an analyst to create this. I don't have to use it. I can use some of these managed skills that come from AnswerRocket. I know that when I use one of those, I'm going to keep getting good, juicy updates to them with every release of AnswerRocket. Or I can make my own, or I can grab one of these and use it as a starting point, right? All these are my options. The main point being that at the end of the day, I want the business user to not care which of these skills was used, and I want the analyst to have their work multiplied via reuse. So I really get the benefit of each of these. Now, one question that we get a lot is, well, why don't you just add every skill and every data source to the Copilot, and just have it be one unique Copilot that answers any question about anything. And the answer is because different users are going to mean different things when they ask a certain question, right? So I'll go through another example in just a minute, but imagine a business user saying, hey, what's going on in the market for a category manager? That means versus competitors, that means unit counts, that means promotions. For somebody, in a supply chain, that might mean, the prices of commodities and the availability of transport and logistics, right? So we have very different meanings for different questions, and it's important that Max understands, the Copilot understands who the user is that it's talking to in order to provide the best possible skills there. So now I'm going to switch over to a completely different Copilot. For that, I'm going to go back to chat. And don't worry, we'll be back in studio in a minute, but I'm going to go here where I had pasta before, and I'm just going to choose a very different use case. This one is a sales assistant for a pharmaceutical sales rep, right? So I went from a category manager that sits at headquarters and looks far into the future and understands everything about a large consumer base, and now I'm supporting an individual salesperson who is working in a small market and really trying to understand how to drive their part of the business, right? So that kind of a persona might ask a question like, who is writing Nirsiga for diabetes. Now, notice that I've got some complicated words here, different brands, Nirsiga, and don't worry, all these are made up. But I've got brand names. I might have certain diagnoses and so forth. I don't have to spell those correctly. I don't even have to use the right terminology overall. The semantic matching is going to really make sure that I get the right answer. So here the question, who's writing Nirsiga for diabetes? The model understood that what I meant is which physicians are writing new prescriptions for the diagnosis of diabetes using of this particular drug that I was asking about. And the answer comes back that Dr. Grace Jones, an endocrinologist, has been prescribing it, and that she's had notable activity from 12 to 8 new prescriptions and so many total prescriptions. And notice I've got this suggestion for what to do next. We find, this is another one of these important points, we find that users, while they do want the flexibility of being able to type or speak their question, they also sometimes just want to be able to click and be able to see a follow-up to that previous question. So I just clicked for the forecast of the next period, and maybe this is the representative wanting to know how many samples they should leave with this particular doctor. And so it looks like, with this analysis, I get a chart. It looks like those numbers are declining. So maybe they were running low on samples. I probably ought to leave some more. And I get, of course, a sentence here telling me, what's going on with that, so I can really tell what's happening. So based around that, the user might say, okay, now I know what I'm going to do with Dr. Jones. There might be another kind of very general question, which is, are we seeing growth with heart docs? Um, and so this is an interesting one because there's no heart docs. In fact, I even spelled it wrong in the database. It's going to be the semantic model is going to have to figure out what I meant by that. And sure enough, it figured out that what I meant was a cardiologist. And because I'm not prescribing any auditory medicines. So in this case, I've got a chart for Jennifer Aniston, another one for Michael J. Fox, and I can see, that these two particular cardiologists are prescribing the drug that I care most about, which is this Nirsiga. The model knows that, and it's talking to me about it and telling me, what's happening with it. So this named entity recognition, or NER, is really important, right? The ability to resolve what's going on with different kinds of entities at different times within your data. So let's go behind the scenes and see how this one works. And so now when I go into Studio, well, you're seeing the same kind of view you saw before, but these are two totally custom skills. One is a prescription forecaster and one is a prescription activity. I could add other skills to this if I wanted to, but in this particular case, that end user just needs these two, the activity and the forecast. So what's behind these? Let's take a look for a second. I want to go into the anatomy of this flow, this colorful flow that we have from the top of the page. And notice it's going to be different for each of these. The flow is going to be slightly different. At the very top, though, in both of them, I have this initialize. Initialize is essentially giving the language model a chance to provide the parameters, or we call them variables, that will feed this question. So the language model, when it directs a question to this skill, it's going to fill in these variables, the first and last and middle name, the specialty of the physician, the brand, the diagnosis. By the time this skill receives those, they're already grounded to match what's in the database. It's another important aspect of how the AnswerRocket chat pipeline works. The language model is talking to the user, and the language model is invoking skills. In the user conversation, it's very natural and vernacular. In the skill conversation, the language model has to be very precise and very direct. Okay, so once we have these values, how do we pull the data using them? Well, the answer is, of course, that I'm going to use SQL. My analysts already know SQL, and they know Python, and they know HTML, and a few other technologies, and they can use all of those with AnswerRocket. But when I write SQL, I'm going to write it in a way that's templated. If I have a physician name, then I'm going to apply it to my SQL. If I don't have one, then I'm just going to apply specialty or whatever the other elements are. So templated SQL is really important. Now, there are a lot of tools out there that are taking the user's question and generating SQL on the fly. And that's something that really can only be done in the hands of a trusted user that understands how to read that SQL. A business user, if they don't truly understand what queries are valid from the database, they have to be using templated queries that have been curated by an analyst on the back end. So Max gives you the best of both worlds, the ability to create SQL queries using templates so that the business user's questions are guaranteed to have valid results with all the right filters and all the right sort of controls on them. But at the same time, the analyst has the flexibility of creating those queries in a way that's super flexible. Next, we see going down this down the sequence, I have this do forecast, and this is where you'll see in my case, I'm applying this linear fit time series to get that next prescription forecast. But I could just as easily, because this is just a Python environment, I could import Facebook Profit and begin using that, right? So at this point, I could use the Facebook Profit algorithm or really any other algorithm that I want to use. In fact, I haven't met any of my customers yet who don't already have a way that they want to do forecasts. So those can be integrated right here through an API endpoint or through a Python module. We have customers that are pulling in Databricks, that are pulling in all sorts of other sources to be able to do these kinds of activities within their skills. Now, I'm going to continue a little bit further and talk some more about how the Skill Studio works for that analyst or for that that data scientist. When I click this output node down here, notice one of the things that I've got is a 30-word paragraph using the facts. This is what I'm asking the model to generate when it does a prescription forecast. Maybe what I really want is followed by 3 bullet points using the facts below. And maybe if I look at this chart currently, I can see that it's a high chart, it's a line chart. Maybe I can swap that over to a bar chart. And typically this would be something that you would have as an option on the UI, but I'm kind of showing how it would work here. And then all I have to do is click run right here in the studio. I don't have to go back to chat and ask a question. So right here in studio, I can see, okay, this is roughly what my results are going to look like. I'm going to be able to move around between these different doctors and different brands. But notice there's no language model output in this case. That's because I'm just troubleshooting this trend result, and I have the language model turned off. That might be so that I can go faster. I don't have to wait for it every time. Maybe I'm not troubleshooting what the language model is doing. If I say what I want to see is the final output, and I want to go ahead and do that with the language model on, now when I run this, I'm gonna get that result. Worked all the way through, including the changes that I made to the chart to make it a bar chart, including the update for the bullets to come out instead of the paragraph. And of course, if I go back into chat, all this is going to work the same way, but obviously with a larger UI. The last thing I'm going to touch on is this validation beaker up here. So I'm going to click that for a second. This is for this Copilot. I have a series of questions that I've asked in advance that I've had a kind of a fine-tooth comb to go through and understand every decision the model made, every decision the Copilot made, all the language, all the charting, right? Maybe, is Redford reacting to the promotion? I can see that everything was exactly the way I wanted it to be with this question. So I can lock that question in. And now when something happens like a language model update, or maybe there's a less expensive language model that I'm thinking about switching to, I can take this bank of questions, rerun them against whatever that new language model is, and I can get a score back that tells me, hey, this is the Copilot is successful. You're good to go. You can publish this live, or the Copilot now has these problems as a result of that language model work. So that automated built-in validation is an important aspect of being able to be live with a language model in a business context. And again, another one of the important points about Max and about AnswerRocket. Okay, so let's wrap this up with just one last slide, just to kind of go through from our perspective. We think your users want insights on demand, and we think you want to be able to reuse that experience in a lot of different ways. We think that your users want a friendly chat experience that's super easy. We think you want it to be secure and scalable using LLMs. We think that your users want guardrails. They don't want to go off the track and ask questions that aren't going to have a good answer, or that aren't going to have not going to be useful because the data's not there. And we know that you want to empower them to go wherever they might want to go, where their curiosity leads them, and securely know that the results they're getting are always valid. So we think Max brings all that together. I look forward to speaking to any of you that want to talk more about Max in our booth. Thank you.